The Gold Coast Country Club's magnificent ballroom glittered with 3 decades of accumulated success as 250 guests celebrated the 35th wedding anniversary of Richard and Margaret Harrison. The couple had built Harrison Manufacturing from a small machine shop into one of the region's largest industrial equipment companies, and tonight represented the pinnacle of their social and business achievements. "You're not welcome here anymore, Sophia." Dad's voice carried across the elegant room where he stood near the anniversary cake, surrounded by business partners, city officials, and the industrial elite who had built their fortunes alongside his over 3.5 decades. At 63, Richard Harrison commanded respect wherever he went. His company employed over 2,800 people and generated annual revenues exceeding $400 million. "This celebration is for people who understand what it means to build something real," he continued, his voice getting louder as heads turned to witness this very public family confrontation. "People who've dedicated their lives to creating jobs, generating wealth, contributing to society in meaningful ways." I stood quietly near the back of the ballroom, wearing my simple black dress, the same modest outfit I'd owned for 4 years. Not because I couldn't afford designer clothes, but because I'd learned that expensive fashion drew assumptions about success that I wasn't prepared to discuss with my family. "Richard's absolutely right," Mom added from her position beside him, resplendent in her custom anniversary gown. "The Harrison name represents 35 years of hard work, integrity, and business excellence. We simply cannot have family members who refuse to live up to those standards." My younger brother Michael nodded emphatically from his spot at the head table, where he sat with his wife and children in their formal anniversary attire. At 34, he was already the vice president of operations at Harrison Manufacturing, positioned to eventually take over the family business. "It's honestly embarrassing," Michael said, addressing the crowd of manufacturing executives, suppliers, and city leaders. "Having a sister who works at some little consulting firm while the rest of us are running a major industrial operation." The guests, including the mayor, several city council members, and the presidents of 3 competing manufacturing companies, shifted uncomfortably in their evening wear. They'd clearly expected an elegant anniversary celebration, not a family intervention. I picked up my simple wool purse and nodded quietly. "I understand, Dad. I'll leave." As I walked toward the ballroom's ornate exit, I could hear the conversations gradually resuming behind me. The string quartet started playing again, and the anniversary celebration continued as if nothing had happened. I was almost to the main doors when Dad's longtime business partner, George Mitchell, suddenly appeared at his side. George had been Dad's closest friend and co-investor for over 20 years, serving on Harrison Manufacturing's board of directors and owning 15% of the company's stock. George leaned close to Dad's ear and whispered something that made Dad's face go completely pale. "What did you just say?" Dad asked, his voice barely audible above the party noise. George spoke louder this time, his words carrying to the nearby guests who were pretending not to eavesdrop. "I said she just bought your entire company, Richard. The acquisition closed this afternoon." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the crystal chandeliers tinkling in the air conditioning breeze. Dad literally collapsed backward into the nearest chair, his legs giving out as the implication of George's words hit him. That's impossible. "Summit Holdings completed the purchase at 4:47 p.m. today," George continued, pulling out his phone to show Dad something on the screen. "They acquired all outstanding shares, including my 15%, your family's controlling interest, and the employee stock options. The total purchase price was $890 million. The murmur that ran through the crowd was like electricity. 250 people were suddenly very interested in a business conversation they didn't fully understand. $890 million? Mom whispered, sinking into a chair beside Dad. "Summit Holdings has been quietly buying shares for 6 months, George explained to the captivated audience. They started with small investor positions, then made private offers to board members, and finally presented a buyout proposal that none of us could refuse." Michael was staring at George like he was speaking in a foreign language. "But who is Summit Holdings? Some corporate raider? A foreign company trying to break up American manufacturing?" I stopped walking toward the exit and turned back to face the room full of stunned faces. "Summit Holdings is my company," I said simply. The silence that followed was so profound I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in the suddenly quiet ballroom. "Your company?" Dad repeated weakly. I founded Summit Holdings 8 years ago, I explained, walking back toward the center of the room where my family sat in complete shock. We specialize in acquiring established manufacturing companies and modernizing their operations while preserving jobs and community relationships. The distinguished guests were now hanging on every word, their anniversary celebration completely forgotten in favor of this unexpected business drama. Harrison Manufacturing was actually our third acquisition this year, I continued calmly. In March, we purchased Midwest Industrial for $340 million. In June, we acquired Pacific Manufacturing Systems for $520 million. Your company brings our total portfolio to 12 manufacturing facilities across 8 states. Mayor Davidson, who had been chatting with city council members near the bar, stepped forward with obvious interest. Ms. Harrison, are you saying you now own one of our city's largest employers? Summit Holdings owns Harrison Manufacturing, yes. Along with approximately 18,000 jobs across our various facilities. We're currently the third largest industrial equipment manufacturer in North America. The mayor's eyes widened. Third largest in North America? Our annual revenues are approximately $2.1 billion, I replied matter-of-factly. Though we expect to cross $2.5 billion next year with the efficiency improvements we're implementing across all facilities. Dad was staring at me like I was an alien from another planet. Sophia, this is impossible. You work at some little consulting company. You drive a Honda Civic. You live in that modest apartment near downtown. I founded Harrison Consulting 8 years ago as a front for my acquisition activities, I explained patiently. I needed to study manufacturing operations from the inside before I started buying companies. The consulting work gave me access to financial records, operational data, and management insights from dozens of companies. George was scrolling through his phone frantically. Richard, there are articles about her everywhere. Forbes calls her the stealth manufacturing mogul. Industry Weekly has her on their cover as the woman revolutionizing American manufacturing. Mom found her voice, though it sounded nothing like her earlier confident tone. But Sophia, if you own $1 billion company, why do you live so modestly? Why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted to understand who you really were when you thought I was unsuccessful, I replied simply. For 8 years, you've treated me like a failure because I didn't fit your definition of success. I wanted to know if your love was conditional on my achievements. My phone rang with the distinctive tone I'd assigned to my chief operations officer. I glanced at the screen. Dr. Patricia Chin, Summit Holdings. I should take this, I said to the room full of stunned faces. It's probably about the integration planning. I answered the call and put it on speaker given the circumstances. Hello, Patricia. Sophia. Congratulations on the Harrison acquisition. The numbers look fantastic. Their profit margins are even better than our projections. We should be able to increase efficiency by 25% without any job cuts. The ballroom was so quiet I could hear the ice melting in people's drinks. That's excellent news, I replied. What about the employee reaction? Overwhelmingly positive. When we announced the job security guarantees and the profit-sharing program, the union representatives were thrilled. They said it's the first time in 15 years they've felt optimistic about the company's future. Dad was staring at me with tears in his eyes. Job security guarantees? Summit Holdings has never eliminated jobs through acquisition, I explained to him. We improve efficiency through better technology and processes, then use the increased profits to expand operations and create more employment opportunities. That's exactly right, Patricia continued through the phone. The Harrison facility will be adding approximately 300 jobs over the next 2 years as we expand their product lines and increase their market share. Michael leaned forward in his chair. 300 new jobs? Patricia, I said into the phone, I'm at a family event right now. Could we schedule a comprehensive briefing for Monday morning? Of course. Oh, and Sophia, that interview request from 60 Minutes about women in manufacturing leadership? They want to feature the Harrison acquisition as an example of how private equity can strengthen American industrial capacity rather than dismantling it. I glanced around at 250 faces staring at me in complete amazement. Have my assistant coordinate with them. I'll review the segment outline next week. Perfect. Congratulations again on building something truly revolutionary in the manufacturing sector. I ended the call and slipped my phone back into my purse. The anniversary celebration had completely transformed into an impromptu business conference. 60 Minutes wants to interview you? Michael asked weakly. They're interested in how strategic acquisitions can modernize American manufacturing while preserving communities and creating jobs, I explained. It's a model we've successfully implemented across 12 facilities now. George was still scrolling through his phone. Sophia, the business journals are calling you one of the most successful acquisition specialists in the country. How did we not know about this? Because you were so busy being disappointed in my lifestyle choices that you never asked what I was actually building, I replied gently. Dad stood up slowly, walking toward me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of awe, regret, and something that looked like pride. Sophia, he said quietly, I need to ask you something important. What happens to Harrison Manufacturing now? What happens to the people who've worked there for decades? Nothing changes except for the better, I replied. Same management structure, same employee benefits, same community relationships. We'll just have better equipment, more efficient processes, and expanded market opportunities. And Michael? Mom asked, clearly worried about her son's position in the company. Michael has excellent operational skills, I said, looking at my brother who was still staring at me in shock. If he's interested, I'd like him to consider heading our expansion into South American markets. We're planning to build 3 new facilities there over the next 5 years. Michael's mouth dropped open. You want me to run international expansion? You understand manufacturing operations better than anyone on my current team, I explained. And you have the Harrison name, which carries weight with our suppliers and customers. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. What now? Dad asked, his voice filled with something between exhaustion and amazement. The Department of Commerce wants to meet about our role in the American Manufacturing Renaissance Initiative. Apparently, they're interested in our model of strategic acquisitions that strengthen domestic industrial capacity. The mayor stepped forward eagerly. Ms. Harrison, this is incredible for our city. Having the regional headquarters of a $2.1 billion manufacturing company based here, the economic impact will be enormous. Summit Holdings is committed to the communities where we operate, I replied. We're not just preserving jobs, we're creating economic ecosystems that support entire regions. I looked around at the faces of family and friends who were finally seeing me for who I really was instead of who they'd assumed I was. For 8 years, you've all treated my modest lifestyle as evidence of failure. You've been embarrassed by my simple clothes, my small apartment, my preference for meaningful work over impressive titles. The anniversary ballroom was completely captivated now. But I wasn't failing, I was building. While you were focused on appearances and social recognition, I was creating systems that preserve American manufacturing jobs and strengthen industrial communities. Dad was crying now, tears streaming down his face as he realized the magnitude of what he'd been dismissing all these years. Sophia, he whispered, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for everything I said, everything I assumed. What you've built, it's extraordinary. You don't need to apologize, Dad. You built something meaningful too. Harrison Manufacturing has been providing good jobs and quality products for 35 years. I just wanted to make sure that legacy continued. Mom stood up and walked toward me, her anniversary gown rustling as she moved. Can you forgive us? Can we start over? We don't need to start over, Mom. We just need to understand each other better. I'm still the same person I've always been. I just have more resources now to do the work I care about. As the evening continued with discussions about manufacturing, job creation, and industrial policy, I realized something important had changed. For the first time in 8 years, my family was seeing my success rather than just seeing my choices. The anniversary celebration was transformed, but in a way that honored both what Dad had built over 35 years and what I'd been building for 8. George raised his champagne glass. I think this calls for a toast. To the Harrison family, 35 years of building something meaningful, and the next generation carrying it forward in ways we never imagined. As the room raised their glasses, Dad put his arm around my shoulders for the first time in years. I'm proud of you, Sophia, he said quietly. I'm proud of what you've built, and I'm proud that you're my daughter. The Summit Holdings portfolio now included Harrison Manufacturing, but tonight the most valuable acquisition was something that couldn't be measured in dollars. A family that finally understood each other. And that was worth more than any corporate balance sheet.